Colton Harris Moore's story is wild, man. It's the kind of tale that seems almost too crazy to be true. This kid, born in '91, grew up on Camano Island, Washington, a place known for its natural beauty. But for Colton, it was a different kind of wilderness. Talk about a rough start. Imagine a childhood filled with poverty and neglect. His home life was far from ideal, with little support or guidance. His mum, struggling with alcohol, wasn't exactly Mother of the Year. She was often lost in her own world, leaving Colton to fend for himself. This wasn't your average dysfunctional family. This was next level. The constant chaos and instability were overwhelming. Colton was practically raising himself in the woods. The forest became his playground, his classroom, and his refuge. He found solace in nature, but it was a lonely existence. The trees and streams were his only companions. He started acting out, getting into trouble at school. His rebellious nature was a cry for help that went unheard. By 8 years old, he was no stranger to the law. Run-ins with the police became a regular part of his life. Petty theft, vandalism, you name it. Colton was involved in all sorts of minor crimes, each one a step further down a dark path. The system tried to intervene, but nothing seemed to stick. Social workers, juvenile detention, none of it made a lasting impact. This kid was already on a collision course with destiny. His determination and resourcefulness were evident even at a young age. The wilderness became his escape, his sanctuary. It was the one place where he felt in control, where he could be himself. Little did anyone know it was also his training ground for a life on the run. The skills he honed in those woods would later become crucial for his survival. Colton's crimes escalated as he got older. He went from swiping candy to stealing electronics, tools, anything he could get his hands on. He was like a ghost, slipping in and out of homes unnoticed. People on the island started whispering about the Barefoot bandit. He'd leave his shoes behind, a bizarre calling card. But here's the thing about Colton. He wasn't just some dumb kid. He was smart, resourceful, a natural survivor. He taught himself how to pick locks, hotwire cars, even hack computers. This dude was like a real-life MacGyver. He could break into anything, fix anything. And the craziest part, he was just getting started. This is where things get really insane. Colton, now a teenager, set his sights on bigger prey airplanes. He was obsessed with flying, man. He devoured books on aviation, studied flight manuals, spent hours on flight simulators. This kid was determined to touch the sky, even if it meant breaking every rule in the book. One night he snuck onto a private airfield and stole a Cessna. He had never flown a plane before in his life, but somehow he managed to get it off the ground. This kid, who grew up in poverty, who never finished high school, was now soaring through the clouds. The Barefoot Bandit had officially become a legend. Word of Colton's exploits spread like wildfire. He became a media sensation. The FBI was on his tail, but he was always one step ahead. He crisscrossed the country, stealing cars, boats, even another plane. He was like a modern-day Robin Hood, living off the grid, taunting the authorities. People were fascinated by his audacity. Here was this kid thumbing his nose at the system, living on his own terms. He became a folk hero to some, a symbol of rebellion against authority, but to others he was a dangerous criminal, a menace who needed to be stopped. The manhunt intensified, but Colton Harris Moore seemed unstoppable. Section 5, Island Hopping and a Daring Escape. Colton's crime spree took him all the way to the Bahamas. He stole a boat in Indiana, sailed it down the Mississippi, then across the Gulf of Mexico. He was living a life of adventure, a real-life pirate. But his luck was about to run out. The Bahamian police were on high alert. They cornered him on a small island, but Colton made a daring escape. He stole another boat and tried to outrun the cops in a high-speed chase. It was a scene straight out of an action movie, but this time there was no escaping justice. The Barefoot Bandit's run was over. Section 6, Captured. The end of the line. The authorities finally caught up with Colton in the Bahamas. He was apprehended after a brief shootout. The legend had fallen. He was extradited back to the United States to face a long list of charges. The media frenzy reached fever pitch. Everyone wanted a piece of the Barefoot Bandit. He became a cultural phenomenon, his story inspiring books, documentaries, even a Hollywood movie. But behind the headlines, a young man was about to face the consequences of his actions. The trial was a media circus. Colton, once a phantom, was now front and center, his fate hanging in the balance. Section 7, behind bars, facing the consequences. Colton Harris Moore was sentenced to over 6 years in prison. He was a symbol of reckless abandon, a cautionary tale of a life gone astray. He entered prison a folk hero to some, a villain to others, but behind bars he was just another inmate, stripped of his notoriety. He spent his time reflecting on his past, coming to terms with the choices that led him down a dark path. He knew he had a lot to atone for. Prison was a time for introspection, for confronting the demons that had haunted him since childhood. It was a chance to rebuild his life, brick by brick. Section 8. The People's Bandit, a divided public. Even behind bars, Colton Harris Moore's story continued to captivate the public. Opinions on the Barefoot Bandit remained sharply divided. Some saw him as a modern-day outlaw, a symbol of freedom and rebellion against a broken system. They romanticized his crimes, ignoring the victims he left in his wake. Others saw him for what he was, a thief, a reckless young man who endangered lives with his actions. They demanded justice, accountability for the chaos he had unleashed. The debate raged on, a testament to the enduring power of the Barefoot Bandit's story. He had become a cultural Rorschach test, reflecting back our own values and beliefs. Section 9. Life after infamy, redemption and reflection. After serving his sentence, Colton Harris Moore emerged from prison a changed man. He was determined to turn his life around, to make amends for his past. He spoke out against crime, urging young people to choose a different path. He knew he had a responsibility to use his platform for good. He wrote a book about his experiences, sharing his story with raw honesty and vulnerability. He wanted people to understand the forces that shaped him, the choices that led him astray. It wasn't an excuse, but a way to take ownership of his past and inspire others to make better choices. He was determined to live a life of purpose, to leave a positive mark on the world. Section 10. The Barefoot Bandit's Legacy, a Cautionary Tale. Colton Harris Moore's story is a complex one, full of contradictions and moral ambiguities. He was a young man who captured the public's imagination, becoming a modern-day folk hero to some, and a cautionary tale to others. It's a story about poverty, neglect, and the allure of a life less ordinary. Growing up in a troubled home, Colton found solace in the wilderness, dreaming of a life far removed from his harsh reality. It's also a story about redemption, about the power of second chances. After his capture, Colton faced the consequences of his actions, but he also sought to turn his life around, to make amends for his past. Colton's journey is a reminder that even those who stray from the path can find their way back. His story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the possibility of change. His legacy is a mixed bag. On one hand, he is celebrated for his daring escapades and his ability to evade capture for so long. On the other hand, his actions caused real harm and fear. He will forever be known as the Barefoot Bandit, a symbol of audacity and reckless abandon. His barefoot exploits became legendary, capturing the imagination of people around the world, but he also wants to be remembered for his efforts to atone for his past, to use his experiences to help others. Colton has spoken about his desire to inspire young people to make better choices. Only time will tell how history will judge the Barefoot Bandit. Will he be seen as a cautionary tale or as a symbol of redemption and resilience? But one thing is for sure, his story will continue to fascinate and divide us for years to come. The legacy of Colton Harris Moore is a complex tapestry woven with threads of adventure, mischief, and the quest for redemption. Section 11, Colton Harris Moore, criminal or folk hero? So what's the verdict? This question has sparked debates and divided opinions across the nation. Was Colton Harris Moore a criminal or a folk hero? To some, he was a notorious outlaw, a menace to society who broke the law without remorse. The answer, like most things in life, is complicated. It's not black and white, but rather a spectrum of grey. He was a product of his environment, shaped by the neglect and hardship of his childhood. Growing up in a broken home, he faced numerous challenges that many of us can't even imagine. He was a thrill-seeker, a master manipulator, a kid who craved attention and escape. His actions were a cry for help, a desperate attempt to break free from the chains of his past. But he was also intelligent, resourceful, and undeniably charismatic. His ability to evade capture for so long showcased his cunning and adaptability. He captured the public's imagination, becoming a media sensation. People were fascinated by his audacity and the sheer scale of his escapades, becoming a symbol of rebellion against authority, a figure who challenged the status quo and defied the system. A modern-day Robin Hood to some, he was seen as someone who took from the rich and gave to the poor, even if that wasn't entirely accurate. Ultimately, it's up to each individual to decide how they view Colton Harrismore. Was he a misguided youth or a calculated criminal? His story is a reminder that the line between good and evil is often blurred, and that our judgments are shaped by our perspectives and experiences, and that even the most hardened criminals are capable of change. Redemption is always a possibility, no matter how far one has strayed. The Barefoot Bandit saga is a wild ride, man. It's a tale of adventure, defiance, and the human spirit's unyielding quest for freedom. It's a story that will stay with you long after you've heard it. It lingers in your mind, making you question and reflect. It's a story about crime, punishment, and the consequences of our actions, and the possibility of redemption. It's about finding hope in the darkest of places and believing in second chances. It's a story that makes you think, that challenges your perceptions of right and wrong. It forces you to confront your own beliefs and biases. That challenges your perceptions of right and wrong. It asks you to look deeper, beyond the surface, and see the complexities of human nature. And that's what makes it so compelling. It's a narrative that resonates, that speaks to the core of our humanity,